Hello and welcome back to CEO.CA's Inside the Boardroom. My name is James Patton, and today I'm joined by a fellow James Cross, CEO of ePower Resources. They trade on the CSE under the ticker EPR and are focused on exploring for graphite in Quebec. James, great to see you today.
Good to see you, James.
So let's kick things off for our viewers who aren't aware of the ePower story. Can you give us a quick overview of the company, the elevator pitch?
Sure. We're a junior exploration company focused on graphite in Quebec. And the reason we're focused on graphite is it is the largest single material component of electric vehicle batteries. And at the moment, there's so much manufacturing capacity being built and getting completed in order to build EV batteries. All those factories are going to need a lot of graphite, and there's just not enough of it around the world above ground to go around. So our view is that they'll have to start acquiring it while it still sits in the ground, and that's where ePower comes in.
Great, and we're going to talk a little more about those graphite market dynamics in a few minutes, but I want to start with an overview of your flagship Tetepisca property in Quebec. I know there's been some ongoing exploration work this summer, and you've announced some recent sample results of very high grades. Can you walk us through what those sample results mean, and then maybe some of the other key components of the exploration program?
Sure. What we did on Tetepisca to get those sample results was explore a part of the property on the ground that we'd not yet visited before. Tetepisca is a big land package in what is known as the highest grade known graphite district in all North America. And our land package there is around 12,600 hectares. So the northern end of the property is something that has great geophysical results from airborne surveys done over a number of years. And we've never until now, we had never visited the property. So what we did was some beat map prospecting, which means the conductors in the ground are already mapped. And one of the ways we find graphite in the ground without actually seeing it or touching it is conductivity. Because it's so conductive of electricity, it can be detected in the ground with reasonable precision from the air. So in a grid pattern, walk over those conductors while dragging what's called a beep mat, which is like a plastic sled. And that plastic sled, if it detects conductivity within about a meter of the ground or a meter from the surface, then the crew can just go ahead and dig there and look for exposed graphitic rock. And from there, we took a total of 32 samples, and 22 of them, I think it was 22 or 23, came back at more than 10% graphite. So, yeah, that's looking like, we always knew that was going to be a good area for us, or at least expected it would be. But, now we're getting further confirmation of that.
Yeah, that sounds like arduous work conducting that sampling, but I imagine it's been paying good results with the grades that you're seeing. Can you put that work in the context of the broader exploration program? What other work is being done, and is the team still on site at Tetepisca at the moment?
They're not there at the moment. They're off on a break now, but the objectives of the exploration program were really threefold. The first thing we did when we got out there was take a sample of approximately a little bit more than 1 ton collectively from 4 different areas on the property, and bring that to our partner company, Volta Carbon Technologies, for processing into a roughly 98% graphite concentrate. So what they're doing for us is turning the ore we brought them into a finished product, which can then be delivered to manufacturers who want to have a look at the stuff to run tests on it and see if it'll work for their purposes. So, and at the same time they do that work for us, Volta Carbon, they'll get us, they'll test for grade as well as flake size distribution. So it gives us an idea of at least how valuable that sample of rock is. Another thing we've got going on there is, further prospecting of, as I just described with the beat map, of other areas of the property we've not visited. And then later on this summer, we're still waiting on the permit for this, but everything's being submitted, and all the boxes have been ticked. So we expect at any moment now. We want to collect bulk samples amounting to about 30 tons from at least 4 different target areas on the property. And then we'll stockpile those so that we have graphitic ore really ready for processing for when manufacturers of products requiring graphite tell us they want, I want 100 kilos of, whatever you got, and here are the specs. We can separate it by flake size, and we'll be able to process it and get it to them. So that's something important to us. So that, at the same time, when we collect those samples from surface showings, we want to do some drill holes with a man-portable drill. Now, that can only drill a few meters beneath the surface. But if you're talking about graphite right there on the ground, and we've got some beautiful pictures of it, you can then, put some short holes in the ground to come up with, call it an in-house resource estimate on that particular showing. So if we're talking to a manufacturer who likes graphite from that showing, then, we're in a position where we can tell them, well, we know we've at least got X number of tons, not 43,101 necessarily, but an in-house resource estimate of what's a little bit beneath that surface showing.
Great. Thank you very much for that overview. I want to hone in a little bit on that deal with Volta Carbon that you mentioned for processing. Can you walk us through, what are the goals with this agreement? So obviously they process the ore into graphite that can be used by downstream manufacturers. Is the goal of this to bring in serious cash flow, or is this more of an opportunity to show to the world what you're capable of and maybe attract buyers further down the line?
Yeah, it's more that, more the second one. More what we would like to do, if we look at some other graphite companies, who've done good work, and both in our region and other parts of Quebec, they've proven up some pretty big resources, and they've sat there for years. And no manufacturers requiring graphite until recently, with the transaction with Nouveau Monde, but we can talk about that in a minute. Manufacturers never really showed much interest. Instead, we're trying to do it the opposite way, is show them the product, get them addicted to it, and then we can determine how much of that product there actually is. So, our strategy is, I guess, a little bit different in that sense.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting approach, and not many exploration stories getting involved downstream with purchase agreements and the like, and processing agreements. So it is an interesting approach, and looking forward to hearing more updates from that throughout the year, especially as you stockpile those that ore, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I didn't quite finish answering the question, actually, now that I think about it. But we're not seeing it as a massive revenue generator, though. When manufacturers, ask for a kilo, sure, we'll just send you a kilo. But if they ask for 30 kilos, that's going to involve money. So, and there are some who've indicated they're quite willing to pay. We haven't even really come up yet with a price, but it helps recover some of our exploration expenses, but is more of a lead generation vehicle than a revenue generator.
Yeah, absolutely. Understood. I guess it's a good segue for us to talk a little about the graphite market. You mentioned that you haven't determined a price in advance yet for some of these small scale sales to downstream users. Can you walk us through the supply and demand dynamics of the graphite market, and why are you getting involved at this point?
Yeah, well, we actually formed the company back in late 2018 and operated as a private company all the way through January of 2023, and then went public on the CSE. And the reason we formed this company is we anticipated that manufacturers requiring graphite, especially in North America and Europe, are going to have to start acquiring graphite while it still sits in the ground, because there just won't be enough above ground for them to go around. And EVs are a major, or EV batteries are a major driver of this, but not the only driver. You've got all this manufacturing capacity of EV batteries getting erected. So by 2035, Benchmark Mineral Intelligence estimates we'll need more than 4 times the natural graphite production globally that we have now. So, and all the money behind what is, a somewhat politicized agenda, the electrification agenda, all the money's gone downstream. Companies look at it and say, all right, we can build a factory in 4 years or a mine in 10 years. Let's build a factory. And they're all doing that now. And the factories are getting completed. So there's not enough graphite to go around for those factories soon to come online. And they're going to have to start moving that money upstream in order to make sure that $5 billion factory they just built is able to produce anything, because graphite is the largest material component of a battery. And you can't make it without graphite. It's got to happen. You absolutely have to have it. And the supply situation is about 3/4 of graphite globally comes from China. And then, thereafter you've got Madagascar, Mozambique, all pretty far away, India, and there's some in Brazil as well. In North America, there's only one small producing graphite mine. And in Europe, they're pretty much in the same boat. Norway has a small mine, and Norway and Canada each produce less than 1% of the global supply of graphite. So the U.S. has nothing. So the way we're looking at this is, if you're spending $5 billion to build a factory, what's another $150 million more to grab a graphite deposit to make sure you can actually build something with it?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the political nature, and especially of that industry, both maybe the need to bring some of that raw material supply closer to home, but also how politics is maybe driving this discrepancy between pushing the manufacturing and maybe avoiding investing in the necessary upstream components of that, such as the exploration and the mining. I guess to wrap up, why should retail investors be paying attention to e-power right now? What sets you apart, and maybe what makes Tetepisca an attractive prospect?
Okay. Yeah. North America only has about 10 noteworthy graphite projects of sufficient size to be very important. And e-power has one of those. And remember, we got into this business anticipating that manufacturers are going to have to take control of supply while it still sits in the ground. And for years, that hadn't happened yet. But now it has happened. And that came in the form of some investments in Nouveau Monde Graphite, who are our immediate neighbors in Quebec. They have the Ouatnon graphite deposit immediately next to us. They announced equity investments back in February, simultaneously by General Motors, Panasonic, and Mitsui, of in excess of $300 million US. So that represents the first time that we've seen industrial players take a big and almost controlling equity position in a graphite company, and with upstream capabilities. Nouveau Monde has 2 of those 10 noteworthy graphite projects in North America. That means there are now 8 left. And as they start coming off the shelf, they're probably going to start coming off the shelf faster. And so e-power is not too many rungs down the list in those remaining 8. And right now, our market cap sits at around $2 million. Our shares are at 5 cents. So, yeah, in my view, it represents extreme value. And, we know the manufacturers are going to one day own what we've got in the ground. It's just, in my view, as how long is that going to take? And now that the trend has begun, I think it's shorter than we expected.
Well, James, thanks so much for providing us an overview of e-Power today, and looking forward to hearing more updates from you throughout the rest of the year.
Thanks, James. Thanks, everybody, for watching.